Dive into The Silent Chamber, the electrifying political thriller about former US Senator Georgia Reynolds, who must expose a massive infrastructure fraud and the conspiracy led by her own power-hungry children to declare her insane and seize her wealth. This full story reveals the ultimate price of honesty in Washington, D.C.
The Silent Chamber, Chapter 1, The Weight of the Quill. 73-year-old former Senator Georgia Reynolds sat at her mahogany table, observing her children. She knew the language of deception, and it was perfectly articulated in her son Robert's strained, almost mechanical smile. Robert, a sitting congressman, was carving the roast chicken with an obsessive precision that betrayed his inner stress. The knife movements were too sharp, too deliberate, slicing the flesh as though it were a tactical problem to be solved. Across the table, Diana Caldwell, a formidable D.C. lobbyist, was the tactician, her gaze sharp as she discussed Georgia's annual medical checkup. Diana's posture was rigid, every line of her silk suit speaking of controlled ambition. The dining room itself was a monument to old D.C. power, Georgian architecture, walls paneled in dark cherry wood, and the priceless Flemish tapestry behind George's head. This room, where treaties had been negotiated and political futures decided, now hosted a small, cold civil war. "Mother, are you sure you don't want me to arrange a driver for your appointment?" Robert asked, his voice overly concerned, but his eyes were darting to the locked doors of her study. "He means the full cognitive panel this year, Mom," Diana smoothly interjected, attempting to soften the blow with professional jargon. "Just the standard baseline, given your age, for insurance. We just want to ensure everything is documented for the estate planning, you know." Georgia set her water glass down. The delicate clink was the only sound in the tense Georgetown dining room, a tiny metallic punctuation mark on the silence. Her mind, honed by decades in the Senate Intelligence Committee, was already 3 moves ahead. They didn't want a baseline, they wanted a trajectory. "I know exactly what baseline they run, Diana," Georgia said, her voice flat, glacial blue, cutting through the facade. "It's the one designed to establish a pattern of decline, a pattern that allows a concerned family to petition a friendly court for a conservatorship." Silence followed, heavy and suffocating. Robert's knife froze midair, a sliver of roast chicken suspended on the tip. The air in the room grew instantly colder. They had been caught. "Mother, how could you possibly think that?" Robert managed, his voice shaky, his whisper, the pretense of concern finally dissolving into raw panic. Georgia didn't address his protest. She had been observing this greed build in them since their 20s. "I'm glad I could amuse you, because last night I finally finished the final edit of my memoir, The Silent Chamber."
The announcement was a detonation. The knife slipped entirely from Robert's numb fingers and clattered onto the platter, scattering polished silver shards of meat. The memoir was her ultimate weapon, a detailed, decade-by-decade account of high-level corruption, including the criminal Lighthouse Project that Robert had staked his entire political career on. "It was criminal, Robert," Georgia corrected, watching the blood drain from his face, leaving his skin the color of old parchment. "And in my book, it is meticulously detailed. All 900 pages of it, complete with names, dates, and the exact wire transfer numbers that proved the kickbacks." Diana put a hand on Robert's arm, her composure finally cracking as she focused entirely on the monetary and reputational damage. "Mom, you can't publish that. Think about our family's name, your legacy. You'll destroy everything we've built." "I am thinking about my legacy," Georgia said, standing. She felt no triumph, only a deep, weary resolution. "The legacy of a lie is worth nothing. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a final instruction to send to my publisher." She paused at the doorway, her gaze sweeping over her perfectly tailored, perfectly deceitful children, a last look at the people they had chosen to become. You both should know one thing. I am always one step ahead. Always." She left the room, leaving behind a silence thick with mutual, desperate plotting. Chapter 2. The Leak and the Den. Within the hour, Georgia was on a secure call with Marcus Thorne, her trusted former chief of staff and investigator. Marcus confirmed her fears. Diana's assistant had attempted to bribe Dr. Harrison's office for files suggesting situational paranoia. Marcus also confirmed that they had retained Frederick Fritz Kelleher, a vulture specializing in seizing assets from wealthy elders, whose retention fee was already astronomical. A legal war was imminent. "They are moving rashly, Senator, driven by panic over the book. They've already paid Kelleher a significant upfront sum to prepare the emergency petition for guardianship," Marcus reported. "Let them," Georgia replied, her voice steel. She initiated her counterintelligence plan. 1. Establish a digital ghost, a completely new, untraceable identity for communication. This ghost needed to have zero digital footprint connecting back to her Georgetown address or known associates. 2. Monitor Robert's financials for liquidation related to the Lighthouse Project, specifically looking for panicked transfers or sudden large cash deposits intended to cover tracks. 3. Secure an untraceable safe location, Suite 1204 at the Hawthorne Hotel. It was discreetly across from the courthouse, the very building where her fate would be decided, a den where she could watch the jackals fight over her shadow. Chapter 3. The Countermove and the Wire. Georgia meticulously spent the weekend staging her departure to look like a spontaneous mental break. She needed to look erratic, not strategic. The performance had to be convincing for the affidavit they were building. She deliberately left her pill organizers scattered on her bedside table and placed a cryptic, half-written letter to her deceased husband in her trash can. The only things she packed were in a small, worn leather briefcase, the notarized silent chamber manuscript, the physical master copy, her passport, key to her actual Swiss fortune, which her children had only ever heard rumors of, and a new, high-sensitivity digital voice recorder. At 2 a.m., while her granddaughter Olivia slept upstairs, Georgia crept to the antique silver chest where Diana kept important papers. The chest, a symbol of the family's manufactured dignity, was the perfect place for them to finalize their conspiracy. Using a jeweler's screwdriver and the steady hands of a former intelligence operative, she precisely loosened the lock plate, avoiding leaving any scratch marks on the centuries-old patina. The operation was painstaking, requiring absolute stillness and focus, a skill she hadn't lost since her fieldwork days. Finally, she slipped the tiny voice recorder, set to Vox mode, inside and meticulously secured the plate again. At 2 a.m., she completed the ruse by leaving a cryptic note. "I went for a long drive. I need to think. Do not call the police." The perfect profile of an erratic, mentally unstable woman seeking escape. She departed in an untraceable black car. Chapter 4. The Family Panic and the Trap. Olivia found the note, triggering immediate panic. Robert and Diana rushed to the house, seeing the note as immediate, prima facie proof for their affidavit. Robert immediately called Kelleher, who advised them to file the emergency guardianship order now, assuring him that his friend Judge Holloway would sign the order to freeze the assets and seize the book. Every strained whisper, every desperate word of their conversation, detailing the fraudulent plan, the judicial collusion with Holloway, and the urgency to file, was captured by the voice recorder hidden in the silver chest. Georgia, in her quiet suite, was now in possession of the irrefutable evidence of conspiracy. The trap was sprung. Chapter 5. Legal Maneuvers and First Strike. In her secure hotel suite, Georgia played the devastating recording for Elias Vance, her former Senate General Counsel and a legal legend. Vance's face remained passive as he listened to the explicit planning of fraud and theft, but his eyes burned with professional outrage.
They have committed the overt act of conspiracy, Georgia, Vance confirmed, the recording still ringing in the air. This recording is the key. It proves their motive is theft, not care. We not only defeat the guardianship, we bring criminal charges. The counter-strategy was set. Allowed them to file the order, then immediately file a motion to intervene, stating Georgia was sound and represented, and an emergency motion to unseal the book and recording as evidence of their criminal motive. The first strike was financial. When Diana attempted to pay Kelleher's $110,000 retainer at Georgia's bank, the bank, tipped off by Vance, blocked the transfer. Panicked, Robert forced Diana to illegally wire the money from the Lighthouse Committee Political Action Committee, or PAC. Robert, his voice thick with panic on the intercepted call, rationalized the move. "It's only temporary, Diana. We'll move Mother's cash back the minute the order is signed. No one tracks a transfer this size in a PAC account." This was a massive felony that directly linked his corrupt political funds to the conspiracy against his mother. Chapter 6. The Leak and the Unsealing. Georgia initiated a political distraction. She leaked a single, highly technical, and devastating sentence about the Lighthouse Project's corruption to a minor watchdog blog, The Swamp Watch. The targeted truth bomb forced Robert to divert his attention and rush his court filing, ensuring it was flawed. At 4 p.m., Judge Holloway signed the emergency temporary guardianship order. Robert, Diana, and the police arrived at the Georgetown house to find it empty. Diana found the tampered silver chest, and the realization hit her. She was listening to us, Robert. She was recording. The next morning, Vance filed the motion to intervene and the emergency motion to unseal. Judge Holloway, facing political ruin, recused himself. The case was transferred to the impartial Judge Ilara Chen, who granted the unsealing. Desperate, Robert used his highest security clearance and discovered Georgia's secret past. He found a heavily redacted file labeled Operation Phoenix, Confidential Advisor, GR. The file detailed her work as a Tier 1 confidential CIA active advisor in the late 1970s, where she specialized in financial forensic accounting and exposing deep-cover corruption in the European defense industry. She was responsible for the swift and silent collapse of a major arms smuggling ring. Robert understood then. She hadn't gone senile. She had simply deployed her oldest, most dangerous skills against her own children, skills honed not on the Senate floor, but in the shadows of the Cold War. Chapter 7. Legal Betrayals. Georgia set a final psychological trap, leaking an elaborate, fabricated story of high-value Swiss and Cayman assets. Diana immediately diverted her expensive corporate investigators on a global chase after the digital decoys, wasting hundreds of thousands of dollars and valuable time. The hunt for the non-existent fortune consumed her. The ultimate betrayal came when Diana, facing ruin and desperate to save her lobbying firm, contacted investigative reporter Helen Roth to leak a sanitized story, framing Robert as the sole perpetrator of the Lighthouse Project. Diana told the reporter, "I always suspected my brother, but I was afraid to speak out. Now I have to, for the sake of public trust." Marcus intercepted the transcript of Diana's call. Georgia now had irrefutable proof of Diana's calculated treachery, cementing both children's total ruin in the impending federal criminal case. She had them cornered, proving that their loyalty to money was far stronger than their loyalty to family. Chapter 8. The Final Hearing and Verdict. The courtroom of Judge Ilara Chen was packed, the atmosphere charged with the electricity of political scandal. Georgia's sharp, composed entrance, flanked by Vance, belied any claim of instability. She looked every inch the former senator who commanded respect. Vance systematically dismantled the petition. He established Georgia's mental competence, introduced the forged affidavit, and then, in a devastating sequence, played the silver chest recording. The courtroom gasped as Robert and Diana's desperate voices filled the air, plotting their crime. Vance then entered the PAC transfer records, proving felony motive. Before Judge Chen could rule, Robert's chief of staff received a note. Diana's betrayal story, exposing Robert as the Lighthouse architect, had hit the newsstands. Robert exploded at Diana in the courtroom, ensuring the political collapse was public and total. He screamed, "You signed my death warrant for a retainer." The chaos in the courtroom was the final testimony needed. Judge Chen quickly dismissed the petition with prejudice, her face a mask of cold fury. The court finds a clear and deliberate conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse. She immediately transmitted the full evidentiary record, including the PAC transfer proof and the betrayal transcripts, to the U.S. Attorney's Office and the House Ethics Committee for criminal investigation.
Chapter 9: The Reckoning and Legacy. That evening, in a neutral, private room, Robert and Diana, now facing federal charges, met Georgia for the last time. They were defeated, their faces haggard, their expensive suits looking threadbare. "You destroyed us, Mother," Robert whispered, his voice broken. "You didn't have to do this. You didn't have to take the fortune." "I didn't destroy you, Robert. Greed did," Georgia replied, her voice soft but absolute. "I merely exposed the decay that was already there. As for the fortune you were so desperate to seize," she delivered the final, crushing blow. "The entire fortune, every dollar of the Reynolds wealth, from the moment your father and I started our careers, has been placed into the Marcus Aurelius Foundation for Congressional Ethics Reform." She revealed the foundation was legally untouchable, established 20 years ago to actively prevent corruption in politics. The trust was designed to be ironclad. Your greedy actions resulted in your wealth being used against the very corruption you embraced. She then presented the transcript of Diana's call. "And Diana, this transcript proves your ultimate treachery. It is now in the hands of the U.S. Attorney, guaranteeing both of your complicity. I secured my legacy against your ambition," Georgia concluded, standing up to leave. "I fought my final war not for money, but for honesty." Robert resigned and faced a brief sentence. Diana fled the country. 3 days after the verdict, Georgia's publisher released The Silent Chamber, which became an immediate bestseller. Georgia retired to Maine, having fought her final war against the corruption in her own bloodline. The final passage of her book read, "The greatest corruption is not in the money exchanged, but in the silence maintained. A chamber kept silent for too long will always collapse."